Hi, Darren here. Thank you for checking out the pilot episode of Business Ascending. This is a podcast where I'm going to be exploring with you how it is we can apply metaphysics, ancient wisdom, and also heart-centered intelligence to help elevate both our lives and our livelihoods moving forward. And I gotta tell you, I'm excited. I'm excited to bring today's episode to you. I had the great honor and opportunity to interview Jack Uldrich. Jack is someone who's been in and out of boardrooms for years. He's the type of guy that some of the biggest brands in the world hire to help them future-proof their business. He essentially is the one looking down the pike saying, listen, if you're wanting to make sure that you keep relevance, keep up with these trends we're seeing in technology and so many other realms as well. Today in our conversation, what we're going to dive into is more about how we can marry up both the work and service that we bring to the world with our heart and our soul. And as he maps out the direction that we're going to be most successful moving in as business moving forward, it's just that the path ahead is Spiritward in his mind. So thank you again for tuning in. Please take a moment just to click the subscribe button. Feel free to give us a like if this resonates with you, and at the same time too, throw a comment in there, and of course the algorithms are going to love that. All right, enjoy. Jack Uldrich, welcome to Business Ascending.
Thanks for having me, Darren.
Oh, you're so welcome, man. This is the first episode ever of the podcast, and man, I'm so honored that you had a chance to be able to join me for this to kick us off.
It's an honor to be your first guest. I'm really looking forward to the conversation.
Nice. Well, Jack, you are not only a global futurist, but the chief unlearning officer for the Unlearning School. I think a lot of folks who are tuning in today would be kind of curious. I mean, what a cool gig, right? To be a futurist, and I'm not sure everyone knows exactly what that is. Can you share with folks what a futurist is?
Yeah, I use an acronym to describe what a futurist does, or at least how I've defined the job. And I call it the big AHA, but AHA is the acronym, and it stands for awareness, humility, and action. We need to be aware of
Nice.
the trends that are transforming our world. Early in my career, I focused primarily on technological change, but of course there is political change, there's economics change, there's cultural change, there's social change, there's spiritual change. All of these things, we need to be aware of them. Humility, what I mean here is we all need humility to the idea that the way we thought about our job, our industry, our customers, our business model yesterday might not be how we think about those things in the future. And it's really under that
Mm,
umbrella of humility that I came to the concept of unlearning, that frequently it's not as though people couldn't understand what was about to happen in the future. What they had a really hard time doing was letting go and unlearning the way they had always done things in the past. So I early on in my career, I did not always focus on that. That's something that I've come to. But then the final A in the AHA stands for action. I love this quote from Peter Drucker, who said, "The only way to predict the future is to create it yourself." Uh, the only time to create the future, paradoxically, is right now in the present. Like you have to take action in the present. So I help the organizations that I work with take action to create their desired future.
Yeah, can you give us some examples of the types of companies that you would help from a future standpoint, and maybe a few examples of how you might kind of share with them ways in which the world might be changing that they should take into consideration?
Yeah, absolutely. I've worked with everyone from McDonald's, big fast food company, to Pfizer, a big drug company. I do a lot in the agricultural space, big banks, TD Banks, SunTrust of America. And for the first 25 years of my career, I worked across all sectors, finance, healthcare, manufacturing. It didn't matter. Now that I'm slowing down a little bit, I tend to focus more on the agricultural space. It's just one that I feel passionate about. But then it also gives me time to focus on other aspects of my life, which hopefully we'll talk a little bit later, but that gives you a sense. And then I do a lot of keynote speaking. Just so you know, if I'm really honest with people, I've written a number of books, but I could not make my livelihood just on my book sales. What I now tell people is most people don't actually want to read my books. They just want me to come in and tell them what's in the book in 40 minutes. So I do a lot of keynote speaking, but it took me 10, 15 years to figure out that that was the viable business model instead of just writing.
Well, in addition to streamlining it, I think the beauty of that too is the human connection, and I think that folks find that oftentimes it's more delivered with a level of trust and credibility when they can kind of see it firsthand there too. You touched briefly upon I think the value of unlearning, but let's go with that a little bit more deeply. When I think about that, why is unlearning at the end of the day something that's just crucial to business success?
Yeah, so the big point, or all of my work, has really been focused on this idea of exponential growth. And most people don't understand how fast the world is changing. And so I would try to walk my clients through that. And I would say one of the really big implications is many of the things that have made you successful in the past will no longer work. And this idea of letting go of things once we've spent a lot of time, money, effort learning them, also when that past learning has been the basis of our success, to suddenly be told, oh, you have to let that go. It is not a natural instinct. And so one of the things I was finding was that counterintuitively or paradoxically, people's past success was locking them into the inability to see how the future was going to change and why they might need to change. And so that's really how I came to unlearning. In fact, let me just be a little more honest. Frequently, I would work with clients who would have me back two, three, multiple times. And I got to the point where I would say, well, what did you do with the information I gave you last time? And the honest answer often was not very much. And I'm like, that's not just their problem. That's my problem. What am I missing? How am I not helping them prepare for the future? And the more I reflected on it, this idea of unlearning was just a blind spot in my own thinking, as well as the thinking and the action of my clients.
I love how that recognition on your part has brought that more so into the forefront of your work over time. And you had mentioned just a moment ago a number of the books that you brought forth into the world, Jack. And the one thing that I really appreciate, the gift that you passed along to me, is the book entitled "The Regeneration." I love the whole different kind of concept of generation, in that we're not necessarily talking about age groups as we would typically think of generations, but thinking more so of a group that has a set of approaches to the world, a certain mindset, a certain heart set, maybe a certain spirit set. In fact, you've done this kind of beautiful job within the book of talking about how a way forward includes this integration of kind of the inner world of heart and spirit with what we've come to really explore as that outer world so many of us wake up to every day in terms of the work and service that we bring into the world. Would you be so kind, if you've got your book there at hand,
Yes.
to read us just a bit of an excerpt out of the introduction? I feel like you and your co-author have framed that up so beautifully. It's a great kind of opportunity to advance our conversation here today.
Yeah, no, I would be happy to. And first, let me just say, so
Yeah.
for your listeners, the RE generation, I just played on this idea that these are individuals, organizations who have reunited something, reimagined, reframed, are moving towards a regenerative future. So it's really just sort of a play on the RE words. But the book
Love it.
begins this way. The world is changing. Old ways are dying and a new world is being born. It's clear existing social and economic practices no longer produce the outcomes they once did. And stepping into this breach are untold numbers of creators implementing powerful new visions for a better world. Many have been toiling to transform the world of business for decades. Some have embraced the ideals of conscious capitalism, and others have dedicated their lives to as social entrepreneurs seeking to solve social and environmental issues through business. I'm now just going to sort of um, fast forward a little bit. Together, these individuals and businesses and organizations are laying the foundations for a better, bolder, and more beautiful world. We call this collective human energy, and those who embrace it Generation RE. This is a generation defined not by age, but by ethos, the ethos of regeneration rooted in the reunion of heart, spirit, and mind. The ethos of Generation RE is consistent with aspirations to integrate the inner world of heart and spirit with the outer world of work and service. It represents a long-awaited reunion of the outer world with what is essential to the human spirit. The health of our mind, spirit, and physical body, considerations of love, compassion, forgiveness, empathy, and benevolence, and awareness of our interconnectedness to one another and the planet.
It's it's interesting when I think about the latest quarterly earnings. Love, compassion, and so much of what we just shared there doesn't necessarily square with a lot of our experience of business today. And we'll circle back to that here by the time our conversation is done. But thank you for reading that. One of the first REs that you had mentioned in that kind of journey in the book and the recommendations set forward is reuniting. And I think that as with every journey, it often begins with yourself. And Jack, you have yourself gone through this process of coming back inward to kind of reconnect with the heart, reconnect with the spirit in terms of how you can then provide some guidance for companies moving forward to make that transition, to make that evolution. And I was so enamored with an article that you wrote just a little over a year ago. It was uh, just a lovely a kind of a awakening and public sharing that stuck with me. It was called "A Spiritual Futurist," and would you mind speaking for just a moment about that time in your life, what that particular blog post was about, and where it led you on your own kind of personal journey here for the last year or so? Because you've made a bit of a professional transition and pivot along the way, and I'd love for you to share that with our audience.
Yeah, maybe if I could step back, and I want to tell you
Please.
a personal story that I've begun sharing more publicly, but I want to preface it by saying this. I read David Brooks' book, A Second Mountain, a few years ago, right before the pandemic. And there was one little passage that really caught my attention. He cited a Gallup poll from the year 2016. And Gallup asks a very interesting question that year. The question is, the gist of it is, how many of you have touched the infinite? And I think it's beautifully phrased. They're trying to get at mystical experiences, but without putting any definition on that. And the thing that blew me away is almost 86% of all respondents said yes, they had had some experience that science couldn't explain. But then Gallup asked a follow-up question, how many of you are comfortable speaking about that? And only 25% said yes. So close to 9 out of every 10 Americans are having some sort of profound or multiple profound experiences, which they don't really feel comfortable talking about. I think one of the things, if we are to evolve successfully into the future, is that we do have to begin thinking about and recognizing these experiences and actually integrating them into business. People should not have to check their whole self when they enter the door of your business, that they are coming with profound experiences. And you'd earlier mentioned the words love, compassion, empathy. And business doesn't feel comfortable talking about those things because, quote unquote, we can't measure them. But I think most of us would agree those are, in fact, the most important things in our world. Just because we can't measure love, compassion, empathy, kindness, other things doesn't mean that they're not real. And so, one of the things I've come to see my responsibility is we need to begin just talking about these things and making them safe to touch. But now let me step back and just say I had my own experience. And this is one that I did not
Okay.
feel comfortable talking about for close to a decade. I'm in St. Louis. I am speaking to the Council of Engineers. There are 1,000 engineers, and I am on stage, and I'm a very energetic keynote speaker, and I'm talking about advances in artificial intelligence and blockchain technology and robotics and 3D printing. And I kid you not, Darren, for about 8 to 10 seconds, it comes out of nowhere. I have an out of body experience. However, I define my I, it is this invisible nebulous blob just sort of off to my right and up. And I'm looking back down on myself. And I don't break contact with the audience. I'm still moving my hands, I'm still speaking, but for 8 to 10 seconds, I'm thinking in my head, but I know that I'm speaking with my mouth on stage. And it I have to grab the podium. I mean, kind of shake my head
Visualize
and
yourself.
yeah. And you would think for as profound of experience that was, I would have immediately investigated that. But after that, I just said, well, that was weird. I hope that never happens again. And I pushed it.
How inconvenient.
Yeah, I pushed it away, but it kept coming back. And what was that? And my first interpretation, this really led me to Generation RE. I took it as saying somehow my heart was like I was so up in my head. I was so trying to convince my audience with facts and figures and trends and all of this stuff that my heart was saying, it's not as though that you're lying, Jack. You're just not telling people the whole truth. And somehow I felt like I wasn't speaking about these ideas of love, compassion, and empathy, that they are, in fact, trends. And in fact, then I began investigating them and saying, oh, people are really tapping into something deeper. And this is, in fact, a trend that businesses both need to be aware of and one that I think, if they can incorporate, will be of benefit to themselves, to their community, and ultimately to the planet. Um, but and that was sort of the impetus for the book, The RE Generation. But I will tell you, I've been a little sheepish sort of promoting the book because in the back of my head, there's this idea, well, who am I? Who's Jack Uldrich to begin speaking about spiritual things? I'm not a trained theologian or anything like that. But then there is this voice to say, if not you, who? And why not you? And
I want to
I
pick up on
begin
that for just a
writing.
moment, Jack,
Yeah.
because I feel like you, my friend, are a bridge. You are not only the right entry point for this, because you have credibility. I think prior to our conversation today, you and I have talked about being in the third quarter of our life, let's say, along
Mhm.
the way. And
Right.
we've been down that path of working with and for Fortune 100 companies and helping to kind of move business success forward in a number of ways. But we are also at a point where we have not only established credibility in that world, but we are now feeling comfortable enough to bring forward some of our personal experiences
Mhm.
that we're trying to both integrate within our own lives, but see the opportunity for business to integrate within its own life, right? Its own expression that actually right now is forming a ceiling, many may not be aware of, but a ceiling that is holding it back from being able to take on its full potential. So again,
Mhm.
I'm here, and many listening in today are here to affirm, Jack, you indeed are the right person in the right place for this kinds of conversation. So just know that from an external perspective, we see it, right?
Okay, yeah. No, thank you. And that's how I now view my responsibility. I mean, to create the space and make this topic something safe for business to both think about, talk about, and move and live into.
I love that. I love that. So as we think about this whole conversation, I believe you and I would agree that this is, if not fully uncharted territory, it is not one wherewith there are many blazed trails, right? So we're grappling with it. We sense a little bit of this. We see where there's some applicability, but there's not necessarily even like a language yet that exists to be able to kind of pull all of this together. You so eloquently have called yourself a contemplative Celtic Christian, and I love that. I love that thoughtfulness behind it. And up until now, it feels like so much of this conversation has been relegated to the religious world, right? Because it seems to have kind of cornered the market on it, let's say. But within the business world, there's not really a lot of this type of conversation going on. So, in many ways, many of us are kind of harkening back to sort of our religious roots to think about how it is we
Mhm.
can frame up some of what we're talking about. I have a dear friend who also more recently publicly shared that she would call herself an Episcopalian Wicketarian Universalist, as she kind of tries to figure out how she kind of puts all of these personal experiences together into something that is somewhat conveyable. But I think our ability to be able to create a language around that begins with a conversation like this. You have, I think, and I admire so much how you curate stories that are so illuminating. You curate analogies that people can start bringing their minds around and hopefully their hearts around. But in particular, you found a word that really resonates with me from the Japanese language, which is kokoro. Is that one that you can spend just a moment kind of sharing with people what that is, and again, how that kind of fits into your larger search for how to frame these concepts up as a whole?
Yeah, and just so I've never I use the word in my book and I write about it. I've never actually heard it pronounced. I've always just pronounced it in my head as kokoro. So
Winging
I don't
it.
actually
So
know
forgive
how
me
it's
to the audience if I'm not
pronounced.
pronouncing
So
it right.
yeah, so we're both speaking of the same word, but in the West, we speak of mind, heart, and spirit as three separate things. Whereas in Japan, they say no, no, no. The mind, the heart, and the spirit are all one. That is Kokoro. And I think it is this
Okay.
beautiful idea. And let me just tell you how I've begun to sort of integrate that. I told you earlier, in the past, I had just spoken sort of with my intellect, and I was trained as an economist, and I still think that way. But now when I speak before audiences, I always say, look, you don't have to do this, but I'm going to ask you to put your hand on your heart and to press down a few times. And I say the reason I do that is because I don't want to just make an impression on your mind. I want to leave an impression on your heart. And so that's how I began integrating heart into my talks. And only recently I've begun, and I wasn't the one that coined this term, but I'm hoping to popularize it. I love this word, spirit word. So don't think backward or forward, think spirit word. And I'm like, oh, that's the direction of the future. We have to reintegrate heart and spirit into our being, into our process, into our businesses, into our lives, into our communities, because I think that's how we will truly create a future that is bolder, better, more beautiful, and ultimately more regenerative. So that's kind of been my personal evolution down this path of Kokoro.
Thank you, and you are living true to your role as a futurist. I love if the language isn't fully developed, going out and creating our own language along the way. I would say that that this, let's see, this era that we're in, as we're trying to kind of grasp the relevance of all of this for business and where we could be going with it, feels a bit messy. Feels like we're
Mhm.
kind of in the mush right now, if nothing
Yeah.
else. And I think the ability to put forth a word like Spiritward, right? To be able to kind of define a path forward brings me back into one of your analogies around the imaginal cells, right? And just the role we're taking on here by having a conversation like this, by kind of thinking forward into what this might look like as businesses begin to begin incorporating it. But would you walk folks through what that analogy speaks to, and how we can all rise forward in this occasion to become imaginal selves?
Yes. So first, let me just stop or sort of step
Please.
back and say, early on in the book, The RE Generation, I said, there are no maps to the future. We can only
Right.
approach the future through metaphors. And I said, the metaphor that is working for me right now is that of imaginal cells. So for your listeners, within a caterpillar, there is a scientific term known as imaginal cells within caterpillars. And these cells contain all of the DNA, all of the knowledge to transform that brownish, sluggish, crawling creature into a multicolored butterfly that can fly thousands of miles. Like, isn't that amazing? And so the metaphor for me is we have in society everything in which we need to transform ourselves today. But the imaginal cells are these entrepreneurs, these individuals, groups, communities who are thinking, doing things differently, and they're coming from a different place. They're coming from the heart. They are embracing matters of spirit, even though we can't yet sort of technically define what that is. And they are showing us, and they're attracting more people. And so I do think that we are in this process of dissolving to ourselves right now, but then rebuilding ourselves into something that is utterly unimaginable today. And so I just love that as a metaphor, but I also like the word imaginal. And I write often about this, that what we can imagine, we can create. Everything around us today, everything around your listeners was first imagined into existence. Whatever chair you're sitting in was first imagined. The table was imagined. The building, democracy was imagined. Market capitalism was the product of the human imagination. And so we have the ability to imagine, but I think of imagination almost as a spiritual sense. It is a real sense, but we don't really talk about it in those terms. We're like, well, we can't talk about imagination, or that's something that little kids do. And I would argue, no, it's where it begins, and there are people who are imagining different futures, and they are providing us the key to the direction, spirit word, if you will.
So interesting. I've been drawn to innovation for years, and as a part of that, as I work with Sprint, the telecom company, now T-Mobile these days, I had the great opportunity to take our marketing and product teams to the San Diego Zoo. Of all things, Jack, it was fascinating. We were diving into biomimicry, this ability to
Mhm.
kind of follow. If you think about nature as this ultimate, kind of encyclopedia of design, over 3.8 billion years of showing what's sustainable over time. You can just look at the plants out in your front yard. You can look at animals. You can all the rest. And the San Diego Zoo has both the largest collection of plants in the world and one of the largest collections of animals. And for a period of time, they started place a lot of effort into consulting, bringing folks like
Mhm.
Nike and others, kind of to bear around how it is that you can begin looking to plants and animals as an example as patterns for design innovation moving forward for sustainability and regeneration. And I guess my larger point in sharing that, sure, lovely that Harvard University came in and kind of plucked a little bit of that out of there for a toolkit that they were putting together for business
Mhm.
leaders moving forward. But I tell you, the people on the ground with me, it was like going back to being a kid again. Oh, it's just putting people, it's like putting a box of Crayola crayons in somebody's hands. You instantly get transported back to that second grader, third grader, or in this particular case, going to the zoo. You started feeling like a child, and all of a sudden there was something magical about the imaginative possibilities that also came through in terms of shifting setting from maybe the cubicle at the office into, oh my gosh, I'm here playing with an elephant and interacting with any number of things too. So that childlike wonder, I think, in many ways is so liberating in terms of where it can take us moving forward with both the imagination in all aspects of our life, including business itself.
Mhm.
That said, let's we've been doing some teasing for a while with our audience. I'd love to dive into some examples because I can think of a lot of folks who are sitting in C suites today going like, okay, you've got me here to some degree, right? That I
Mhm.
believe there's probably room for some compassion. There's room for the heart to play a role. There's room for kind of a spiritual integration to business to some extent. But at the end of the day, I got to hit my numbers. I got to make sure that this is happening. It's a bit more hardcore in terms of that kind of profitability and the success. Could you take us through some examples as you've been thinking, Jack, of maybe what some of the entrepreneurs, some of the businesses that are showing up today are beginning to do that integrate more of the Kokoro into the overall process? And then even where we could take this in the future, just so I think our audience can kind of imagine it a little bit more, so kind of put a framework to it and kind of have something tangible, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So I didn't cover this in the book. The book was written three years ago now, but I recently came across someone who is studying the world's oldest company. These are companies that have been around for 1,000 years. And just so you
Wow.
know, as a futurist, I'm enamored of this idea. Like, if you want to understand what's going to survive in the long, long run, in the deep future, study what has already survived thousands of years in the past. That will give us some clue. And the author started not with a company that had successfully lived 1,000 years. We can talk about those. They were talking about a dry cleaner that and dry cleaners were hit really hard during the pandemic. It was like the perfect storm. First, they did have to close down, but then people weren't going to their offices, so they didn't need their clothes cleaned. And there was one that did survive. And the gist of how this small business survived was for the 20 years before, he got to know all of his customers and he saw them as spiritual beings, as souls. So he would talk to them, he would care about their kids. And when the pandemic hit, because his past clients knew him and how much they cared about him, they started bringing their rugs, all the things that they didn't need dry cleaned to keep him in business. What he was doing, and this is why it's so important for business, is he was building resilience through recognizing his customers as spiritual beings. And so to me, this isn't a soft, fluffy idea. Our world is so chaotic now on so many fronts. The advances coming in artificial intelligence, the possible rise of authoritarianism, climate change. These things are real. How are we going to survive and ultimately thrive through all of this, if not building resilience just as a strategy? But I would argue then spirituality and matters of the heart are a key component of that strategy.
So as I think about a business in this particular case, going it's unfortunate to say it this way, but this is kind of today's paradigm. Going the extra mile shouldn't be this way, but to really to see the folks that they are providing services for, their customers as individuals, as and to connect with them at a heart level, to connect with them at a spiritual level. All of a sudden, the time comes, and whereas if I've only had a superficial relationship with my customers, whether I survive or not as a business is less relevant to them. But if you have impacted me through every conversation we've had, every time I've come through the door, I've gotten to know you, I've gotten to know your family, I'm invested at that point in time. All of a sudden, I have skin in the game. I want you to be able to survive throughout this because you're bringing me value that goes well beyond just the dry cleaning. It's the dry cleaning plus you see me. You see me as an individual. You see me as part of the larger community. You understand that level of connectedness that we have, and I value that. So that's
Mhm.
I love that. Yeah,
Yeah. Let me just give you one other example that I do
please.
profile in the book. I live in Minneapolis, and there's a company called All Square. And all they do
Okay.
is make grilled cheese sandwiches. But the gist of the story is this. It was founded by a woman. She was a high-powered attorney for the Department of Urban Development. And the rules are once you have gone to jail, you've paid your debts. You're all square, right? Like you've paid your dues to society. But that's not actually how it works. Once you've gone to jail, your ability to get a loan and to get housing is really, really hard. And she's just said, this is unfair. And you know what? Politics is not going to solve this issue. You know who I think can begin solving it? Is business. And now what she does is she only hires people who have paid their dues. They're all square. And the community now understands what she's doing, who she is hiring. The community is supporting her and her store, and their grilled cheese sandwiches are delicious. But she's even gone a step further. Now, she helps those people go on and get educated, and many of them have now become attorneys. And she is transforming her community and the world through business. And to me, she is an early imaginal cell. Now, it's very, very small in scale, but it's a starting point. I would argue that companies like Patagonia, who are asking 30-year questions, how do we make sure we're going to be in existence 30 years in the future? Oh, we have to live in better harmony with nature, right? And so they're really working that into all of their business processes. So these matters that have always been sort of considered soft or fluffy or woo-woo, I would argue are hold the key to businesses' future survival, especially in the long, long run. Will it necessarily help you get higher quarterly profits? No. Will it help you survive in the long run? Absolutely. And so I think to your business listeners, take off your CFO hat and don't just look at the next quarter. I understand you have to do that to a certain degree, but as the CEO, you also have to have a longer vision and where is all of this headed? And I think that there really does have to be a more holistic approach. The Kokoro, the mind, heart, and spirit is the key to long-term success.
So, Jack, I'm going to invite you to play with me here a little bit as I think about folks who are tuning in. There are people here maybe for a lot of different reasons. We could start with individuality. When I think about myself and how I plug into my career, maybe I'm doing something today, but maybe it's not something I'm bringing my full, heart, mind, and soul to as an endeavor. Um, with AI advancing as quickly as it is, a lot of folks are finding that they are either in a position where they need to kind of retool maybe how they're showing up within the business today, and what that kind of ongoing career looks like for them too. So, as we sort of imagine what a role might look like moving forward into business of the future, what might that look like? As you think about that for a moment, in terms of what an individual should be thinking about for their own pathway, right? I'll paint one example and give you some time to think about another. There's a gentleman named Robert Edward Grant, who's phenomenal around everything from bringing sacred geometry down through into a very publicly accessible form, helped to create, in fact, an AI platform that runs on Gaia today called Architect Plus. But in addition to that, he found that he was working with a group of folks. He used to be the CEO of a pharmaceutical company back in the day, but as he's kind of rounded into a bit more of that spiritual work today, he was working with a number of folks, trying to imagine what does it look like as I try to figure out what my new career is in the future. He had them do a Venn diagram of everything from, goodness, it could have been their quantum human design profile. It could be their zodiac. It could be their enneagram profile. He just had them kind of bring in some things that we don't typically look at. You know, back in the day, I would have used Gallup's Strengths Finder and
Mhm.
some of the things that HR might use as kind of regular tools. But what he had found in this conversation with one of the participants who came along, he was a corporate attorney at the time, and trying to figure out like what's my role as a corporate attorney in this future of AI and kind of a more of a heart-centered, you know, kind of business world moving forward. And by looking at some of this personal information that was coming through this Venn diagram, he actually received a bit more confirmation that this desire that he's had kind of welling up within him for a while to become more of a somatic therapist of all things
Mm.
actually kind of squares more with I think as Robert would put the result of that Venn diagram was the authenticity profile for that person, right? So I think a lot more of it is sort of this, my goodness, it's probably the simplest question asked over the ages, but one of the most complex things to do, which is or the pathways, which is know thyself, right? And man, what a lifetime mission it is to know thyself, because it's just this. There's not a lot of time that we've spent to kind of dwell within, to kind of go within to say, at the end of the day, yeah, I'm a corporate attorney, but who am I really? What is it that really am I drawn to? How do I want to express myself? What do I feel about this? And how do I want to be able to show up and walk in the world? And where do I find both my passion and my flow, right? Where is that really coming along? And it could be both, but at the same time too, it's just fascinating to see some of those insights pop up. So with that in mind, if I'm out there listening today going like, yeah, this sounds like a future I want to be a part of, but I'm not sure how I plug in moving forward. Is there any advice that you'd offer someone individually to just kind of think about what does that look like for a career? And
Yeah, and let me just step back. And you'd mentioned it earlier that I identify myself as a contemplative Celtic Christian. And I, I want to make clear I am not here to proselytize or to evangelize to anyone. This is just my particular path. But each one of those three words holds great meaning to me. And I think the first two are certainly relevant for everyone on this planet, all 8 billion people. When I say I'm a contemplative, what I believe and what I have experienced is through silence, through meditation, through contemplation, we can come to know ourselves. You'd use that quote, know thyself. And that was apparently was on the outside of the temple of Apollo. But inside were the words, thou art. Like once you know yourself through silence, silence is, I would say, God's first language, or that's how, and don't get caught up on the word God, use divine consciousness, the creative mystery, whatever you want to use. But I think it is in silence that we can really hear, and that we can hear that we are something more than just our physical bodies. We are more than what we are in the material world. So I think silence is the first language. Celtic, to me, I've always loved indigenous wisdom, particularly being from North American indigenous wisdom. I, however, am not Native American, but my ancestry is from Ireland. And so I've studied deeply, and the Celts were the original indigenous people of Ireland. And the way they experienced the divine was through nature. So I think nature is the second path forward to understand that there might be something greater than ourselves out there. And then, of course, the Christian. I just went to Catholic school. I was raised Catholic. I still there's a lot I like about the Catholic Church. There's some things I don't, but I do believe that that's another path forward. So to answer your question, I think the first two, like, make meditation a regular practice. Just create space. Because what you're trying to do is gain control of your thoughts to get to the paradoxical point where you can have no thoughts. But once there are no thoughts, there's still something there. What is it that's there? And everyone has to experience that themselves. I can't tell you what it is, but I think you can experience it. And then nature, I just love getting out. You were talking about biomimicry. Like I love to just look at trees, birds, get out under the night skies. There is, and to me, they're all just reminders of how little I actually know about how the world works, but it's in that space of not knowing that you can come to a new type of knowing. So uh,
Love that. So
those are a couple of
introspection.
yeah, those are a couple of the paths forward that I would recommend: contemplation in nature.
So if I am, and I've also been tracking and seeing as a larger trend and experience so many business leaders, whether they're entrepreneurs and founders, or whether you are leading some of the largest organizations out there, have achieved such a great degree of both business success and material success, but at the same time too have found that for all of that, there's still something that's not entirely fulfilled in their lives. There's a longing that's still there to or a bit of an aching still there to fill. And with that, it's interesting. We see a tremendous amount of trends moving forward around everything from life coaches popping up to assist some folks in this nature, folks moving towards plant medicine, certainly folks moving towards meditation, and through that, I'm coming to hear a lot of breakthroughs that they're having. But as they think about then, well, hey, this balm has been great for me, could this be good for the business as well? So this is kind of this cracking open of this kind of intuitive thought that wow, as I start kind of healing that longing within me, is there also a place for that within business to kind of incorporate that into the way it works? As leaders, they have a number of folks that they can impact as well. What advice would you give in terms of, like, next steps? It's hard to turn some of these big ships around. They're large organizations that have a momentum of their own. But what if you were to give someone in a leadership position today maybe a first step or some recommendations on how to begin kind of making this transition into embodying more so of that kokoro in terms of the unity, the heart, mind, and spirit within business? What would you recommend along the way, Jack?
Yeah, I think the first thing I would say is, could you reframe the question? I had a thought, but I just
Yeah,
lost.
no, it's lovely. I think the organizations are just they're marching to their own
Uh,
tune right now, and they
yeah.
love what you're painting as a picture, but they're not even sure what that first step might look like. What would you
So
recommend, right?
yeah, so let me step back and just say, as a futurist, as a corporate futurist, and I think that every serious-minded CEO, CFO, C-suite person can get this. Like, the advances in artificial intelligence are coming fast and furious, right? Well, what does that mean for us as humans? Like, this is a question you should seriously be contemplating. What I argue is that AI is very good at mimicking the human mind. It's very good at mimicking data. But are there certain things that are uniquely human? And I would argue they are. And what are those uniquely human things? So this is where we get to the love, the compassion. Like, these are the things that are absolutely essential, are going to become more essential in the future. And then I think one of the real silver linings of AI is going to be is, and let me just paint you a possible scenario. AI gets so good that a number of people are laid off, but maybe society comes to a new agreement that says, you know what? We no longer need to work 40 hours a week. We can get by on 16 or 24. So we only have to work 2 or 3 days a week. We will have a lot of excess time. Now, I'm realistic enough to know that most people will just use that time to watch more Netflix, scroll on their phones, watch sports, pornography, gamble, drink, whatever, very materialistic aspects. But there's going to be a growing number who says, this is an opportunity for me to grow spiritually. And what is that? And so to me, the silver lining of the AI revolution might be it will point us back towards a spiritual revival. And I don't put a flavor on this. Like, just so you
Yeah.
know, from a historical perspective, every time there has been a major technological advance in past history, when people were being pulled off the farms into cities because of the mechanization of tractors and other things, there was a spiritual revival. People were like, who am I? What am I to do? Where is human meaning? And I think we're about to experience that same thing. But the smart businesses say, we're going to start recognizing you as the whole you. And we want to use some of that time to help you grow as a spiritual person. I think that will resonate with clients that people say, I want to do
Yeah.
business with companies who recognize their employees as true spiritual beings. And I would certainly, you know, I'm, upper middle income and have discretionary income where I might be able to spend a little bit more to express my values. But I think more people are going to begin supporting those companies and businesses who are taking this bigger approach. So I think you can even get the bean counters on board by saying this is a real trend and you can't dismiss it. You can't just look at the hard numbers. You have to look at the whole person and what we're doing for the community and the planet, and that's going to be rewarded. So
I'm
I
going to
think
bring that back to. I love that. I'm going to bring that back to the dry cleaning here in just a moment. But yes, I can see where that would definitely pay benefits around employee attraction, employee retention along the way. But at the same time, too, just in terms of the services that they're delivering. Again, if you've got a large constituency of clients, of consumers who are in that process of who am I, where, what is it that I am here to do along the way, as a business showing up to help assist them through that process is also something that's a potential source of revenue there for them as well. This has been lovely. Thank you so much, Jack, for going through this. I guess a couple of things. First, I want to ask, where can people find out about you? How can they find out and learn more about what you're up to and get in connection with you?
so. My website is just my name, which is jackuldrich.com. And I primarily, every Friday, I will post what I call postscripts on the future. It's just a blog where I talk about future trends. But for the last 5 months, I've been writing daily on spiritual matters on Substack, and my account is called The Sprouting Acorn. And that's kind of how I both view myself that, the aspiration is to become an oak, but I'm no longer an acorn, but I feel as though I'm growing. But, the next step is to break ground and then become a sapling and over time. But I also hope with my posts that those themselves are little acorns that might lodge not just in your mind, but in your heart and your spirit, and to help you on your path. And so I want to make clear, I think one of my responsibilities is not to tell anybody what to think, but how to think. And I really want to end on this note. I used to think it was just a bumper sticker statement, but it's a quote from a Jesuit theologian scientist. He's no longer with us, Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. And he said, we're not humans having a spiritual experience, we're spiritual beings having a human experience. And to me, that's no longer woo-woo. I try to see you, Darren, as a spiritual being. I try to see everyone. And I fall short all the time. Don't get me wrong. I even don't see myself as a spiritual being most of the time, but I try to come back to that because I think that this is how we are going to grow, to close on that metaphor of the imaginal cells. We are dissolving. Society is changing right now, but there is a better future, and it is already embedded in us, and it is our task through our heart, through our mind, and through our spirit to birth this new world into existence. That's my overall operating philosophy.
Jack, I think you have so eloquently brought us to a close here. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the work that you're doing out in the world today. Like you, I feel like I am just feeling my way through this as well, and I believe this conversation is the start to kind of a larger conversation that we'll see carried forward and seeing so many other beautiful souls kind of building upon as they join into the larger chorus. With that, hope this is one of many conversations yet to come with you, and wishing you the best of days.
Well, I wish you the best of days as well, and I just want to thank you. I think the role that you are playing is much needed, and I hope that your listeners will comment and share this to those aspects of this conversation that resonated. Like, that's how we transform the caterpillar into a beautiful butterfly.
Butterfly.
So
So,
again, thank you.
all right, Jack. Till next time, everyone. Thank you for joining Business Ascending. We'll see you soon.